everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Alignment Podcast, where I am excited to introduce to you a dear soul whom I got to connect with just the way life works. And I have been very delighted to be in her presence, to hear what she's bringing to the world, which is so illuminating. And so I'm excited to introduce dear friend and dear soul, incredible author and just incredible being, Katie Dean. Give it up. Woo! Welcome, Katie. Welcome.
Oh, thank you, John. I'm so honored to be here, and thank you for such a beautiful introduction.
Love it. Love it. So, one thing that I love to start the podcast off with is that wonderful question: what does alignment mean to you? I'll preface that by simply saying that's why I named this the Alignment Podcast, to speak to alignment with the source of life. But I want to hear, what do you think of when you hear the word alignment? What does that bring for you?
So that brings me, I'm talking about alignment to myself. And it was through being so far out of alignment from myself that I ended up on this journey going through chronic fatigue syndrome. And it was coming back into that alignment with my truth and all the parts of me that has brought me recovery. And that's actually just a beautiful, simple way of looking at what was a huge story. So it's really, alignment is reconnecting with all the parts of me that had got lost and scattered along the way.
And can we talk about what that process looked like for you? What that journey entailed, in the way that maybe some of the lessons you learned in bringing those parts together? What did that look like?
Yeah, it's been a really long, 20-year journey, plus a little bit extra after the healing. It was 2002 when I first got sick, and I was on a trajectory that, fitted all the social standards. I just graduated with a PhD from Cambridge University. I was working as a management consultant in the City of London, set for this sort of high-flying career, and assumed that my life would pan out with the marriage and children and everything that we sort of expect. And then it was literally one morning on my way into work, I just basically collapsed. I mean, looking back, I could see the signs coming, but I'd chosen to ignore them. I thought my body was some kind of superpower that didn't need sleep or food or all these good foundations that it's nice to have in practice. And that was it. And I was in absolute denial for quite a long time. It took 6 months to get a diagnosis of chronic fatigue syndrome. And the diagnosis came with the doctor saying, well, this is what's wrong with you, and we've got no answers. We don't know what to do. This is it for life. Sorry, bye-bye. And that was kind of a shock. So I suppose looking back now, I went through this whole kind of grief process of losing the life that I was expecting to have. And of course, the first stage of that is denial. So for the longest time, I was phoning into work each Monday morning going, well, I'm still not very well this week, but I'm sure I'll be back in the office next week, which was so unrealistic. And, then it sort of gradually dawned that, no, I was not going to recover next week. And then it says, well, what do you do? And people just kind of dropped into my life with like little steps forward. So one of the first steps I had was nutrition, which had never occurred to me, but I found there were foods that my body did not like and foods that it did like. And by playing around with that, I noticed my energy increasing. I was very set on this being a purely physical illness, which it is very much in the physical body. The mitochondria of the cells are disrupted, so the cells cannot produce the energy and perform in the way that they want. But just through working with this physical layers, I only ever got so far. And it took a second complete crash in 2016 before I began waking up to the fact that there are other parts of me that play quite a huge role in how good I'm feeling. And so I was kind of dragged kicking and screaming really into this exploration of the mind-body connection. First of all, on quite a conventional sort of psychiatry kind of level, I guess. And that again took me a little bit further as I began to realize that actually some of the weird pains that I was experiencing in my physical body were actually emotions. And I could do things like a breathing technique or some yoga, and it would shift things. So, yes, revelation to me. This was not at all in my vocabulary or mindset prior to getting ill. And so, yeah, I went a lot further with that. And then again, somebody just popped into my life that introduced me to energy healing. And I had this session that was remote, and I could feel, I tuned in with this healer, and we'd spoken about things that were going on in my life. And she was like, right, lovely to talk to you. Just have a quiet afternoon. You might feel something, you might not. And I felt all these symptoms shifting in and out of my body. And I was like, okay, there's something huge here. So that was like my last avenue of exploration, and that's what sort of took me over the finish line. And the lessons along the way were really just each time was reconnecting back to a little part of myself that had got lost. And so the energy healing then opened up into this, well, great spiritual awakening, really. And much to my own amazement, I started doing things like remembering past lives and seeing that it wasn't only things that had happened in this current lifetime that were depleting my energy. I'd actually brought in traumas from past lives. And for me now, looking back, the big lesson was that all of these challenges are an invitation to us to lean in and understand and from that place heal, really. So, I sort of see the past life challenges reflected quite directly in challenges in this life. And the fact that it's so big kind of felt like that was why it took such a long time. Because there were moments when I was like, really, how did you take 20 years to unpack all of this? Could you not have done it quicker? And no, it was perfect divine timing. Each one of those steps was a lesson that I had to learn, and I'm still learning. I'm still working through resistance, still uncovering more layers, and yeah, the journey just goes on expanding, and I'm excited to see who I'm going to expand into when I've gathered all those little parts back together, because having the energy to live a normal life is only sort of step one for me, really.
Beautiful. Your journey, as I have been able to witness some and really intuitively and energetically picked up on the work you're doing, feels very beneficial, not just for you, but for others, like the work you're doing, but also, and that's, let's call it internal work, but also the things you're bringing forward have an obvious and very clear impact and benefit for others. Can you talk about some of the things you've been inspired or received on this journey to support others?
Yeah, well, the first and most obvious thing actually started coming in back in 2015, believe it or not. And that's my book, thank you. It's called Finding the Energy to Thrive, Navigating the Maze of Life to Embrace Your Path to Wholeness. And it's my chronic fatigue story, but it's bigger than that. It's all the wisdom that I gained along that path. And I hope it's going to be a map for other people. So I was sort of given this metaphor of the maze, really. That was in 2022, that metaphor came in. But the book itself actually started in 2015. Well, you could argue maybe in 2002 when I first got sick and I was researching it. Didn't know that's what I was doing. But 2015, it was actually in July of that year. I've got this clear memory. I literally woke up one morning. I'd had this weird dream, incredibly vivid, like lucid dream, and woke up and was like, I need to write a book about chronic fatigue syndrome. And I started on that day. So I've got the actual date that it happened. I opened it by chronicling this dream and then sort of went into what I was experiencing that day. So for 2 years then, I was not every single day, but very regularly just journaling my experience, but not sort of as a personal thing. It was as if I was talking to an audience and trying to explain what is chronic fatigue syndrome. What does it feel like? What am I experiencing? What do I know about it? And looking back on all of that now, there was a lot of anger in there. I mean, I talked about the grief process. There was so much, like, I just wanted to take the world by the shoulders and shake them and go, this is so unfair that this is happening to me. Help me, please. See me. It's very much an illness that feels very invisible as well. So that journaling process came to an end in 2017 when I'd actually started treatment, but I'd started something that looked like it was going to be really impactful and positive, and then it wasn't. And that was from that pinnacle of hope to this crashing despair again. That was a really, really low point. And actually the last journal entry in there it's really dark. So that all kind of got parked. And then in 2020, I sort of had this instinct to revisit it. And I actually showed those pages to a friend of mine who is also a book editor. And she came back with some feedback that was kind of, well, yeah, this is great stuff. It's interesting, but in its current format, it's not going to be very helpful for anybody else. So that sort of set me gradually rethinking, okay, how do I do this? But again, I sort of put it to one side. And then it was 2022 and it was like, right, I'm writing this book now. And I got this download of The Maze. And so that's kind of the framework that everyone has their own individual journey. I mean, we all do through life anyway, but also through chronic fatigue. I mean, so my recovery path is not going to look the same as anybody else's. And I think there was a certain frustration with people who are out there sort of saying, oh, here's the 5 steps to recovery. And you're like, oh, great, yes, let me do those steps. And then, no, I'm not recovered. And then you end up with this kind of cycle of self-blame. It's like, well, what's wrong with me? What did I do wrong? And you can get into this narrative of there is no recovery possible. And that's what I see with so many people. So I wanted to do something different from that. And my book is about helping people to tune back into themselves. We opened here starting with alignment, and it's really helping people to align with themselves and to understand what is happening in the body and to begin to see, well, is this particular thing happening in my body? Is this particular protocol actually helpful for me? Would it be helpful at the moment, or is it actually something further along the journey? So that's kind of the framework and the scope. And I'd really love people to finish this feeling hopeful, feeling empowered. And, if they then feel they want to come on a journey with me supporting them more, then fabulous. But it may be that that's just empowering them to go and work with other practitioners, but really holding on to that hope, which was sort of my intention of, I am going to find a way through this maze. There has to be an exit somewhere, if only I can find it. So this book is your guidebook to that exit.
Love that. You mentioned 2 things that arose for me. One, it's so funny. So let me just back up. So as I'm being present in receiving, I keep seeing these 2 parts of you. Like literally as I'm looking at you, I'm looking at the sage, I guess really 3, the sage, the present, and then like a past you, right? They keep coming forward. And the 2 that I feel need to be acknowledged is 1, the past you, and then 2, the sage you, right? So the past you, I think is the journey of how you begin to be open, or how you opened up to receive downloads and like what that looks like for you. So let's start there. As you have gone through, were you able to, you mentioned receiving the download about the maze, for example. Were you able to do that prior to fatigue, or did that begin to open up that ability to listen and receive? Did you begin to use that and respond to that before or after? What did that journey look like for you?
That's really interesting, actually, because when I look back now, when I was a really, really tiny child, I did a lot of things that might, be labeled as sort of psychic. But I was in a family environment that kind of didn't dismiss that. So I didn't get completely dismissed, but it was a sort of like, well, this is maybe a little bit dangerous. So it didn't get developed. So as I look back now, I guess I've always had this ability, but I kind of shut it down, and I was channeled very much into conventional life, really. And I dutifully went through all of that, through the education, through, into the proper job and so on. And it was almost like that chronic fatigue moment was like my soul going, no, this is not your path. Just stop right now. But it took then that 20-year journey for me to start picking those pieces up again. And it was really, I don't know, the spiritual opening then kind of came about both gradually and suddenly. It came out of the chronic fatigue in that I'd connected with someone through a conference who was then setting up a sort of a spiritual school, except that I didn't know that's what it was. I was just looking there for help from recovery from trauma that I hadn't even known I had. And so that sort of evolved gradually. And once I got into that atmosphere, then things just started opening up. And I've had, as I say, downloads will literally just come through. I'll just know things. And then I'm reflecting back and I'm thinking, well, actually, I think I've always in some way been communicating with and channeling spiritual beings, but I didn't know that. I thought they were just other things in my head. So I'm exploring all of that. So I find it fascinating that you're seeing you're on point with the three parts of me. The old part, the current, which is sort of in the middle, is letting go, releasing the old, or perhaps more accurately integrating that, and then inviting in what's coming through. And I've had all sorts of experiences now. I've connected with a few of the archangels, but I see them as light, colored light. I remember it was, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago, I had this incredible yoga class where, I have a beautiful yoga teacher who's actually based out in LA. So I do the classes on Zoom, and it's highlighted my week. But I remember just settling into our opening breathing exercise and sort of closing my eyes and beginning to breathe. And suddenly I was in this green light, and just the incredible love and gentleness and holding that I was experiencing. I was like, I don't want to open my eyes. I just want to sit here. And, I was kind of almost sort of holding my breath through the class going, please don't go away. And, I would open my eyes and I could sort of still feel the presence, and then I'd close them, for a flow, and I could see the light again. And it kind of went on after. So, that was just so beautiful. And that was part of sort of introducing, because it was just last year, began channeling my other offering, which I'm developing, which is something called the Kolorlan system. You can just make out some of the artwork behind me. And it's basically a combination of sacred geometry and a set of 15 specific colors that correlate with 15 chakras sort of through the body and beyond. There's 9 that sit like within the physical body, and then there's 6 that connect up to the galaxy and the universe. And all of that started coming through. Again, I don't yet understand all of what I've brought in and I'm bringing in. It was just like right, you do this. Okay, I'll do that. Now you do that. Okay, I'll do that. And I don't know why. And the geometries that I draw, I don't sort of sit down and go, right, what am I going to draw today? they come through. I've seen them in meditation, I've seen them in dreams sometimes, or sometimes it's just a kind of knowing of like, I need this shape here and I need to do this and I need to do that. But, you know, if I were to sit down now and go, right, I'd like to create a geometry, it doesn't happen. So
Right.
there's something coming through that I have yet to fully comprehend. And I think that's part of the me coming back to alignments, because I believe that this is knowledge that I've had in past lives and used in past lives, and I'm remembering it, but gradually. And I've connected with four of the archangels, bringing this in, and it makes so much sense because I had Raphael, that's all about healing, Geophil, which is creativity, Uriel, which is wisdom, and Zadkiel. And I remember seeing this kind of purple light come through once. That's been really fleeting. Some of the others have come through more frequently. But yeah, for me to actually be sitting here and saying all of this out loud is still really like, whoa, I feel like Alice in Wonderland, just yeah, fell down the rabbit hole, and I haven't kind of put it all together and emerged yet. So
Well,
we'll see
that's
what happens.
you're in the perfect aspect of your journey, because it's wonderful that you're sharing exactly what you're experiencing, because so many of us can relate. And the gifts that come through as you're aligning, being of service, remind me of songs, right? Like, for instance, the sacred geometry, I'm sure they have their own frequencies embedded and different things like that, and are unique, kind of like a song, right? You can write it in the same key, but it's going to be unique, or you can write it in a different key, and you know it's going to have its own frequencies, embedded meaning, etc., etc. The things you're bringing through. One, I think there is a level of probably understanding that in that knowing that you're integrating, yet it might not, to your conscious mind, it might not be giving you the language yet.
Yeah.
Right? But the reality is that that level of knowing that is delivering it, that I feel like that's what we're often integrating, is that. And sometimes we get to explain, right? And get words that explain, or sometimes somebody else has the words that explain the very experience we've had. And it's like, oh, that's really cool. But the cool thing is you experienced it and you have it, and you've integrated it, and you're bringing it forward, or what have you. So that's a long way to say, it sounds like you're on the perfect journey.
Yeah.
So I love that you had mentioned before. Oh, almost forgot that other integration part of the older sage part of you that I was picking up on. I think is part of that past lives, that you're speaking of, in that wisdom, in that knowing that you're integrating into, kind of bringing that forward as well into the present. So it's fascinating. I've had a similar experience. I don't know if I've ever shared it on the podcast. I can't remember. But I'll just briefly say I had the experience of going through incredible trauma and wanting to end my experience in this journey, in this lifetime. And it was the first time I had knowing come up and tell me to bring through the things I'd learned in past lives. Like, I'd never had my knowing tell reference that. So I was around 18 at this time, right?
Wow.
And it literally had me reference all these practices that I had mastered prior to, and I brought them in. I just started doing all kinds of stuff at the same time, and it was intense, right? But it helped me navigate through it, and eventually I ended up expanding into like this light and this love, and looking down at my own physical body, right?
Wow.
But being in both, being in all of this love and the light, and being the love and light, and being in the body at the same time. It was like I could literally shift my awareness. Well, I don't think I was shifting it. It was like my awareness was in both places at the same time. It was the wildest thing. But I say that because experiencing past lives is different than believing, hearing about it, or the concept. Right. It's like when you've experienced it, it's kind of like not even it's not even about belief anymore. Like you've got to let go of belief because you know.
Yeah.
Like you're like, oh, okay, this is reality. So for the listeners who might be like, past lives, I don't believe that. That's okay. It doesn't need you to believe in it. You might get the experience and find out another way. But all that to say, I do feel that integration process for a lot of us, what you're talking about is what many of us are going through. The tentacles of traumas from past lives, but also the wisdom of traumas from, or excuse me, the wisdom of past lives we can integrate and then shift those traumas as you've been doing and doing that healing work. So that's powerful. Thank you for sharing that. So the second thing I want to get to is you mentioned as people are going through these offerings, they might have an opportunity to work with you. What does that look like, that process?
That is the $1 million question. Thank you.
Yes, yes.
That's what I'm still moving into. I mean, for me, this is the next layer, and I want to say very much thank you for sharing your experience. I deeply appreciate, and
Absolutely.
it sounds amazing. And to pick up on you saying also to anyone who might be sort of not sure about belief in past lives, yeah, hello, that's me. Um, so there's been a lot of actually trying to validate myself in a way. I mean, I remember the very first past life memory that came through in a meditation. And it was a very visceral experience of the way in which I had died in a past life. But actually, it wasn't traumatic, reliving that, thankfully. But then after the meditation and after that had settled, I then got, intuitive downloads with more information about that. So I know exactly specifically who I was and so on. But then my immediate reaction was like, no, that can't be true. I've somehow made that up. So all that really to say that I am still really trying to integrate who I am and what I'm offering. At the moment, I'd love to do something for the chronic fatigue community that is really giving them this roadmap. I don't know precisely how that's going to look beyond what is already in the book. And I know that with the Kolorlan system, that is going to be a tool. I mean, I've already started doing a few things with that. So I've started creating meditations with it. So they're visual meditations, just quite short, but being immersed in that color and the shapes changing is mesmerizing. And I'm getting lovely feedback from people saying things like they just feel their entire nervous system just recalibrating and settling. So that is very powerful, or could be very powerful.
I forgot to ask you to speak to what what the system is. Well, I mean, you touched on the sacred geometry and how you receive it, but then how other people use it, like the offering that you have. Can you speak a little bit on that so people understand?
Yeah, certainly. So at the moment, I've got various coloring books. So they've got the sacred geometry images in them. We've got a set of the gel pens that are for colouring and they correspond to the 15 colours. And then I created a set of colour cards. And that's actually, although we've got 15 colours, there's actually 45 cards in the pack. Because for each colour, you've got the balanced sort of central, and then it can go a darker shade or a lighter shade. So it's sort of inviting you to explore the elements, because each colour represents a set of awareness. It's like information about elements of yourself. So, for example, the color red would be related to safety, to security, to groundedness, to boundaries, and so on. So, if you were pulling a red card, it would be an invitation to explore, well, what is going on in my life right now? Is it something to do with safety or is it boundaries? And so, if the card was lighter, it might be, well, am I feeling very unsafe, or are my boundaries very weak? Or if the card was the darker red, it might be like, well, are my boundaries actually so rigid that I can't let other people in? So there's all these nuances to explore for each of the colors. And I've been doing these practices myself where I will take a number of colors. So there's another little set of cards that will invite you to choose 5 colors or 8 colors or however many. And sometimes you're choosing them actively, like looking at the spread of colors, what is drawing your attention now. Sometimes you're relying on the intuition, so you turn them face down and just pick, like energetically, or that card, that card. And as I was doing that, I was just finding that the colors that I was picking were so in line with what I was experiencing on that day and in that moment. So you've got this element of reflection. The coloring books have got space for journaling if you want to sort of outline what's coming through from that. There's a book that's explaining the meanings of the colors, so you're not in the dark with that. You can reference that and go, well, what does this card mean? And then it's just spending the time taking your geometric shape and using the colors you've drawn and just coloring it in. And there's powerful messages that are coming through from that. I mean, aside from the fact that it's a lovely, relaxing, mindful process, every time I create, what I've ended up creating is beautiful. And I see that as a reminder to myself that I am beautiful in all my perfect imperfection, no matter where I am. And also every time it's different. And again, that's this reminder that we're evolving, we're unique. So there's these beautiful messaging inside of that. And I wanted it to be a system that people can just, you can buy the whole thing. So you get your coloring book, your color cards, the pens, and then, everything you need to just be able to do those practices on your own at home whenever you feel like it. And so for me, that's daily. It helps me tune in. It helps me sort of release things and just calm my nervous system down. So that's the offering that's currently in it's a shop online. I also then started creating artwork that people can buy. So one that, again, this was a download just before an event I was going to last year, and I was like, look, source team, next time please give me more than a week to prepare this, because I was scrabbling around trying to get all this stuff together. I mean, I did it, but I ended up creating, to show you, these coasters. So they've got the geometry and the coloring on, and I was selling them at this event, and the lady I was sat next to had bought one, and she was like, do you mind if I use it now? I was like, of course, be my guest, it's yours, you just bought it. So she stood her glass of water on it, and then 5 minutes later she sort of leant over to me and said, you might think I'm a bit odd, but I'm sure my water's now tasting different than it was before it was on there. And I was like, well, no, actually I don't think that's odd, because I think they are creating frequency that charges water. Well, literally 2 weeks ago, I sent one of these over to a lab in Switzerland where they do the water photography, like the Masaru Emoto. You're trained in his system. And oh wow, the crystals I got back from that are just so stunning. So again, that was this sort of validation of, okay, maybe there's something real coming through me here. So I went to explore all of that, because I have an idea that may be how it's actually interacting with us, because we are water creatures. So much of our cells and our system is actually water. It's Gerald Pollack who's talked about structured water, and that being the way the body communicates internally. Sort of the more structured water we have in our system versus what he terms bulk water or unstructured water, the healthier our cells are, because they're sitting in this water and it's shaping them, it's guiding them to carry out their tasks. So I have this idea that the frequency that's coming off the Kolorlan images is actually connecting and structuring water. So that could be within our systems. It can be, the water in the glass that you're standing on the coaster. And I think just having the artwork around, it's kind of injecting that frequency into the atmosphere. I mean, my house just feels beautiful. I've put it up all over the walls, and I have had friends come around now and say how relaxed they feel and how energized they feel after visiting me. So So I'm
Beautiful.
sort of exploring all of that and how I then go on to, take that out to people. So, if anyone is thinking, yeah, we'll go on trust, well, dive right in now. And I will be following up with you. I'm researching more, both through what's coming through intuitively and if I can, sort of more in the practical, evidence-based material world that we inhabit. So,
That's so beautiful, sister. And you are what I would consider a trust pioneer. Because many of us will dive in, we're following our own unique paths, as all of us, have these own unique journeys, but we're letting go of conditioning and the limitations of what has been or what we have been given, and just really exploring and receiving and trusting, and not necessarily understanding where we're being
no.
guided, but like you're saying, hearing it go, and then you get the validation later. Okay, now it makes sense why I was going that way.
Yeah.
So that's so great, and I commend you for that, because I feel that's part of the childlike nature of exploration and trust, and just embracing that belief that there is something beyond the limitation and the suffering,
Yeah.
and to me, that's the mustard seed of faith, that moves mountains. So kudos to you. When people order these kits and order your work, where do they go? Where do they
So
get them?
my website for the Kolorlan system is kolorlansystem.com.
Okay.
And I will just explain Kolorlan. It's Kolorlan. And it's actually, that is a word that I kind of crafted from two words from the native Cornish. Now, Cornwall is a county in the very far southwest of England. The energy there is insane. It's where my family actually originates from. So I've visited loads, still have relatives down there, but I've never actually lived there. But I'm very attached to that geography and that energy. There's all sorts of legend there. So in the northern part of the county, Tintagel Castle was rumoured to possibly have been where King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table were based. I mean, there's lots of stories, so there will be others that say no, it was somewhere else, but that's one of the possibilities. There is talk that Jesus and John the Baptist visited Cornwall at some point. So it's got all these connections that just felt kind of right for me to use that. So colour, which is spelled Kolor in the ancient Cornish language and obviously means colour. Lan, which is Lan, is ancient Cornish for sacred place. So it's literally sacred place of colour is what that means to me.
That's so cool.
Thank
I
you.
love that. So interestingly, when working with color, it sounds like that visual modality, and then of course the sacred geometry aspects of it, all combined for you as a spiritual practice, kind of something that you've brought through as a technology, to not only support your journey but support others' journeys,
Yeah.
which is really fascinating. I wonder, did you have a visual inclination prior to receiving this as a spiritual technology? Like, was what I call modalities of thinking, or what I've learned to call modalities of thinking, like the visual learners, the visual creatives, etc. Prior to, were you very a visual learner, or
Yeah.
did that enter into your world at all?
Yeah, so I've always been a visual learner. I've somewhat had a photographic memory. I remember like revising for exams, I would need to write things out and I could look at the page. And then I remember being able to like sit in the exam room and it's like I could sort of see the page and it could be frustrating because it'd be like, I know the answer to the question is right there in my visual, but it's kind of a bit fuzzy at the moment. Please bring that through more clearly.
Right.
So I've always had that. I was always very much into craft and art, but interestingly, sculptural stuff. And when I got sick and ended up having to leave my job in management consultancy, I'd learned how to do beadwork. Actually, the necklace I'm wearing, don't know how much it shows up, but it's a stone, and I've beaded around it with your little tiny glass seed beads. So I was making jewelry, I was making flowers. I used to do wedding bouquets for people, like literal three-dimensional flowers made out of beads. And I created a business out of that, which sustained me through the chronic fatigue years. So I've had this artistic background all the way through, but it was fascinating because it was around 2018, 2019. Just suddenly the beading, it was just like, right, you're done with that, which was amazing to me because I'd been so absorbed in that. And so like, I never ran out of ideas. In the beading world, I had this reputation for the amount of stuff that I created. People couldn't believe it, and they were like, well, where does it all come from? Well, I don't know. And it's back to, I think I was channeling that as well. So yes, so it's not really surprising to me that I should be bringing through a modality that is visual, and also the physical element. You're actually physically coloring. You're doing something. It's using the body, which I feel is very important actually, because so much of what we're carrying is carried within the body, both energetically and physically. So modalities that only work on your thoughts, I tend to find can have limited results. You need to get into the body for releasing things as well.
That's so beautiful. So the creativity and what I've noticed in when we're aligning and bringing through things is exactly what you said. Multiple modalities are typically engaged. What you're describing is like motion, the body, and different things. I think of as kinesthetic, right?
Yeah.
Like the feet, because there's a feeling, and everything you described that you were visually creating was also tactile, right?
Yeah.
So really cool. So there's that kinesthetic aspect as well, and I think that's important to emphasize in our conversation because I think one of the benefits of alignment when we're really doing what you were referring to as the integration, one of the benefits is really accessing genius. And genius is like the science or the study of or what have you, if you want to put it in those terms, is often using multiple modalities to receive or experience information. And good examples, music. Like when we listen to music, we're using the audible or audio modality, but we're also using the kinesthetic of many of us because we feel it. Yeah. Like when your favorite song comes on, you're like, oh, that's my song, and then we start kinesthetic, we're moving and dancing, feeling it in the heart and whatever, right? So, but then the creative side, we can do the same thing. And that often, as a songwriter, and then as a songwriter teacher, I love having people learn how to align, relax, expand their awareness, and receive and explore where those modalities are, how the information comes to them. And as we do that, what I've noticed time and time again is the ones that are our strongest. Like in your case, you had a history of these, the visual and the kinesthetic and tactile things get used. And then we also can expand into others as well, right? Like it sounds like you're also having this cognitive. Like I think of the cognitive as a little different. like this knowing that comes through
Yeah.
as, information all packaged,
Yeah.
and you're unpacking it like, wow,
Yeah.
that to me is a modality too, so it sounds like that's happening for you. And I imagine other things as well, like you're expanding into different ways of experiencing, like even the colors you mentioned, like to me, that's a beautiful, like what you described as the archangels and those experiences, I think is a beautiful aspect of us expanding into these higher levels of our own consciousness. It's all our consciousness,
Yeah.
and so that's just fascinating to hear your experience with that. So I'm really honored, I'll say, to get to witness the journey you're on, because I feel like it's a very authentic and bright path, meaning like I sense the pureness of it, I'll call it. Like there's a pureness of it that I think will assist others in just beautiful ways.
Thank you.
Yeah, that will really help others come into not only the practices and integrating, just as you said, the intention is to really find themselves, integrate, and
Yeah.
and shift, or as others call it, heal. I think that work, like I feel and sense that in the work that you bring, and even in what you've already created within your own process. So just really looking forward to supporting and seeing the new book. Can't wait.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Congratulations. And you were also in, just briefly, another project recently. I think we were in together. You want to mention
Yeah.
that project as well?
Yeah, the TV series Navigating the Clickety Clack.
Yes.
That was so much fun, and yeah, I
Wasn't it?
was so thrilled to be in that with you.
Yes,
I love
likewise.
Johnny. You've been just such a support to me, and I just want to say thank you. And it's
Well, thank
just an
you.
absolute joy whenever we get to connect and work together in some way. But
Agreed.
yeah, that was a wonderful project, and again, something that's very much needed on this planet right now. So yeah, lovely catchy title, Navigating the Clickety Clack. And really clever because it actually came from this idea of if you're riding a bike and you're shifting gears, there's that little moment where you're not quite in the old gear and you're not quite in the new gear, and it's a bit disorientating. And this is really what's happening for a lot of us as we're shifting. I mean, as that process of coming into alignment is, as I have experienced, it's disorientating because you've still got the old familiar on the one hand, and then you're beginning to bring in the new, but you're not quite sure where that balance sits. So this series was all about interviewing people who've been through those great big shifts, and we covered an awful lot of ground in terms of different kinds of shifts. I mean, I was talking about my health story. There were stories of people with bereavement, and John, I'm sure you can talk a little bit about what you were sharing within that. But it all had this common theme of you're knocked off balance, and how is it that you manage to realign yourself and hopefully move in onto a higher gear. So it's not just like recapturing what you've lost, it's actually moving up a pace to a more expanded version of who you are. So it's a wonderful series. Each episode is quite short and sweet, but so many beautiful souls in that with so many amazing stories. And the latest
Indeed.
update I heard, it's going to be on Amazon Prime. So
Awesome.
that will be a place that a lot of people can watch it, hopefully, and enjoy it.
That's beautiful.
And
And
yeah,
it's won so many awards. I can't keep up anymore.
no, I think 18 was the last count I had, but it could be more by now. I
Exactly. I
mean,
think it's 19 now. I
is
just
it
got an
19
email
now?
yesterday. So
Excellent.
every day it seems to be a new count. But
Yeah.
the cool thing about that, lot of for those of you who haven't checked it out yet, when you do get to check it out, you'll see Joe Vitale, Marie Diamond, John D. Martini, other wonderful friends of ours, even folk that have been on the podcast, Dr. Karen Kahn and Keith Leone, the director, and his a wonderful team. So many beautiful stories of finding peace, of finding ways to navigate what is called the seemingly toxic world,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But to open our eyes and see the opportunity and the perfection of it all, that's what I've been grateful to have seen so many of those stories coming through. And like you said, even the grief of, loved ones past, transitioning and things like that, and just so many beautiful stories. So I love that we're in it as well, sharing our stories, and that all of it comes together in such a powerful way. So tune in, check it out. Make sure to check out Katie's story, my own story, and everybody else's. I think people will be surprised. What it all comes down to for me, like even as you and I are talking, there's this sense of just gratitude for the love. Like that love behind the design, that love behind the sacred geometry, behind the gifts, that love behind the journeys, that whatever that thing is that, we're communicating with and aligning with, and has all that wisdom for us. And like that's really what I feel like it often brings us back to, reminding us of, there's just some just fascinatingly incredible love that's
Yeah.
that's we can not only access, but it's always there. We just are often very distracted from it.
Yeah.
But we can always come back. And so that's what it all reminds me of. And even talking to you today brings me back to that. So just grateful, dear sister, and knowing much success is going to come from, or already has come from, you just birthing these wonderful works just to get it out for everybody who's going to get to enjoy it. Excited for them and you.
Thank you.
Well, everybody, this has been another edition of the Alignment Podcast. Thank you, Katie Dean, for being with us. Thank you, listeners, for enjoying. Make sure to go to our website. Was there another website as well? You mentioned that one.
So there's the kolorlansystem.com website, and there's also Find My Energy, which is all one word, .co.uk, which focuses more on my book and on the chronic fatigue journey. But the two are intertwined,
Perfect.
for sure.
Perfect. So make sure to check out the sites. And with that, we say much love. May you find alignment in powerful ways. Peace out, everybody.
Thank you.